Hello and welcome back to the Age of Sunbros YouTube channel. This is SerSharkDad with another podcast episode. As you can see here, the home city is Sweden, and we have the autumnal leaves and some snow. So just signifying the weather change as I am here way up north in the United States, and it's getting a little blistery out. I am joined here by Mr. V. Isn't it? What's the full name? I've always heard like Maker something. Is that not you? You're just Mr. V?
Yeah, just Mr. It's what I go by during my day job, so I just figured I might as well just keep it consistent all the way through.
Is the V like, is that a stand-in for your last name? Like your actual last name starts with a V, or does it mean something? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just my last name. My last name is Dutch because I'm from the United States, but my family comes originally from the Netherlands, and it's really hard to spell, like a lot of Dutch names. So I just go by my initial most of the time when I'm talking to people, because if I try to spell it or sound it out, it's like a whole nother conversation in itself.
Oh, okay. Oh, awesome. In case all of you, there's maybe some people who, I imagine a lot of people who watch our stuff, watch your stuff, but why don't you go ahead and just kind of give an introduction as to exactly why you're here and who you are, if for those who don't know.
Sure. So I am an AoE III exclusive content creator on YouTube. Mm-hmm. I don't do any live streaming or anything like that, but I want to. I just don't know how. And I started about, I want to say like a year and a half ago. I've been in Age of Empires 3 for a long time. I was a caster years ago. Then I went on break, and now I'm back. And how I came here, I was listening to your guys' really great discussion, by the way, on the patch. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of the first time I had fully sat through one of your podcast episodes, and I kind of got hooked on it. So I think that's when I reached out to you and was like, hey, amazing job. And then you were kind enough to extend the invite. So here I am.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who maybe watch our stuff and are not familiar with you, Mr. V he's got a fantastic YouTube channel. I think he's probably the best caster in the business. I know that, we're good friends with Lionheart here, and it's no diss to him, but I think Mr. V is criminally underrated as a YouTube creator. So please, if you're here, you're listening to this, then go ahead and give him a subscribe and take a look at his content. He does a wonderful job. And so, let's start there. What was your introduction to Age of Empires 3, just to kind of, get a feel as to exactly, were you like a legacy player, or did you start with Okay.
So I wasn't one of the really, really dinosaur players. Mm-hmm. I don't go all the way back to 2005. I think I started playing in 2012 when I was in middle school, and I did what everybody else did, where I played only campaign, and I did not micro. I didn't have any hotkeys, and then I went on the ladder and I only played team games, and I only played as Portugal, and I'm pretty sure I only made Castadors because I was like, this is just so cool. And then I spent my time in the 700, 800, 900 elo playing as Russia, where I did an 11-vil age up into pure Strelette spam, and it either worked or the guy made Cav, and I just lost instantly, but I enjoyed it a lot. Then I found my true love, which is Dutch, which is now the civ I play exclusively. And then while I was doing that, I was following the scene when Interjection and Zuda they kind of ran the YouTube side of AoE 3, and they were one of the only casters beside ESOC uploading. And I got into ESOC as a caster. I just kind of filled in. I was more of a substitute when most of the big hitters weren't available. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of retired from that around 2018, 2019, as I kind of finished college and got into the workforce. And then 2023 is when I started seeing guys like Lionheart and Widgie, and I was like, man, I miss that. I got to go, try that again. And at first it was just, cast some games, have some fun, get a little editing practice, make some use out of my Adobe subscription, and it kind of took off from there. And I've never stopped. It's a lot of fun. I'm sure you can agree.
It is a lot of fun. There's no pay in it, but it's a lot of fun. Yeah. Okay. So you've been around the scene for a while. So what were you ever like? Was that like an ESOC involvement when you were doing your casting before you kind of went solo?
Yeah. I used to go by a really stupid username. I think I called myself like Drawer or Door, or it was dumb.
Okay.
And I remember I was like, I had the most basic microphone, and I would set up in, my parents' old computer room, like for those people that are too young and they don't, they're not old enough to have lived in a house that had a computer room, like a room dedicated to the, big, huge monitors we used to have.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just cast out of there, and I sounded like absolute garbage. And I didn't know what I was talking about because I was like a 1200 ELO player. I don't even know why they let me do it, to be honest with you. But the guys there were really kind. Yeah. The old school guys like Chrissy, I think Chrissy 101, he's one of the old school casters. I never got to cast with Interjection, though we did have a couple conversations together. And then, when I came back, I was still, involved with ESOC, and I still cast with them occasionally, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't happening often enough to get that AoE 3 fix, so that's why I made the channel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was my next question, is whether or not you were still involved with ESOC at all, and if you feel like do you feel as if there's maybe, do they just not call you enough, or is it more because, do you feel like there's a drop off in content from ESOC?
Well, that's honestly a really good question, and I don't really know the inner mechanisms behind ESOC. I know some of the guys that are the heads of it, like Josh, and all my interactions with those guys have been fantastic. I know that the group of casters that they have just come from so many time zones and areas of the world that getting two guys to come on the same day and cast at the same time, along with a guy to run production in the background, it's such a headache.
Right.
But yeah, I think, ESOC overall, just since DE and since, since the game has kind of fallen to the back burner, I think a lot of guys in ESOC just feel like, that it's a lot of work for what the devs give back. And I know that's what you guys kind of talked about during the patch, is like the community just is, always striving to make the game better, but sometimes we feel like we're on an island and we're isolated. And then over on the mainland, is where all the AoE 2 and AoE 4 people are, with the devs just hamming it up. But yeah, I can't speak for ESOC as a whole, but that would be my best guess.
So you were saying that you feel like it's the lack of content being delivered up from the top down, rather than it is just ESOC, putting themselves out there, because, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, is, for those who don't know, ESOC is like our sort of organic, I don't know, what would you call them? Like, they're supposed to be our esports kind of outlet.
Yeah.
So ESOC was back in the day. Now, you and I were very young, obviously, at this time. So if you go back, those sites probably still exist, those ESOC forums, right? Like, this game, when it was the legacy game before DE, was subsisting on ESOC, right? ESOC, the forums, that's where you had your engagement between the player base. This is where you got this is where the pros would come to talk. This is, like you said, the casting games and all that kind of stuff. Like, all of that came out of ESOC. Like, they were kind of the spearheads, and then eventually, right, they came up with like community patches and things like that. So they were that was like the golden era. And then, I don't know, I feel like, and I want to get your thoughts on this, is that this is not a knock to ESOC at all. I think, a lot of people still have a lot of love for them. I haven't really had many interactions with ESOC outside of Josh, and any of those guys, like the old cadre of professional, the original people who are like spearheading all this, that they're not like on the precipice of the scene anymore, right? I don't think people say like if I go on somewhere and I'm like, hey, where do I get content for this game, or where do I get guides, where can I meet people, talk to people? Usually you get recommendations for like Discords and YouTube channels. Like ESOC is not something that really comes up anymore as like a point of conversation. And then when somebody gets involved in Age of Empires 3, they suddenly hear about ESOC on the back end. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I think, there's definitely been a fall from grace, and I don't know if it's been due to just loss of some of their core leadership, but ESOC used to have so many different branches. The tournaments was the main thing, but then you also had the ESOC maps, which were the competitive maps, right? Because back in the day, you didn't play tournament games on, the actual maps that the game provided, because they were horrifically unbalanced in terms of resources and like hunt spawns and coin mine spawns. And so, you had guys like Gaia who would make just full-on maps, and you had this really healthy, modding scene. And then on top of that, you had things like Azank's UI. So, ESAC had all these different tools that they offered, along with the website, ESO-community.net, I think is what it's called. And I think it's still up if you go there. But now it seems like they've really constricted themselves to just seasonal tournaments. And I think that's mainly due to just a lack of staff, right? Like there's, I think, a very small group of people keeping that community alive. And I don't want to, say one way or the other why that is. I will say that from what I've seen, being one of those organizers is a very thankless job, and it brings a lot of flack from certain people in the community that, they like to be what I call like the sideline players, right? They're not involved, but they always think that what they think is how tournaments and forums should be run. And so, I think over time, a lot of guys just were like, screw it, man. Why am I continuing to do this when every time we come out with an idea or a tournament, I just got 20 guys on the forums telling me how stupid it is.
Yeah, not for anything, the game has changed significantly too since that time. Right? Gone are the days of, I think I had a conversation with somebody, it was probably Platt, where we were talking about how it was like they're like knights of yore, like to watch Azamp and Kaiser Klein or whoever, go at it, and it was France, Germany, semi-FF. This is like,
right.
And like you're talking about that as if it's like this is like an old jousting match, right? These two knights, these two titans of the game, and they're just in an honorable clash, and exactly what they're going to do, and it really comes down to like small little plays. Now the scene is wide open, right? And you get some foolishness in DE, right? But the thing is that I get the feeling that maybe a lot of people from back when, who remember what it was like and really played it and lived it and breathed it and really mastered it, they probably feel very, I don't know, uncomfortable maybe, or just like not wanting to deal with the changes, right? They're like, you know what, it lacks skill to me if I'm going to make 10 Hussar and then suddenly you're popping Highlanders out of your TC, and I'm like yeah. I don't have the enjoyment anymore. And so they probably just bounced after that, and then
right.
We're kind of left in the wind. Well, not really in the wind though, because and that's my next question is that, do you feel as if maybe we need to have an ESOC resurgence? Like maybe there should be like a one like concentric place in terms of our content creation that we all should point to, or is DE in the way that it is just better? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think there should be a resurgence without some sort of change by, the developers. I think, and this has been something I've been stewing on for a while, and, watching your guys' thoughts on the patch really got this, got the gears turning in my head. But if we continue to inject life into a game without any developer feedback, I think what that teaches, the guys over there that are currently just kind of putting AoE 3 on the side is that they can continue to do that because there are guys in the community that will just pick up their slack. And I don't want that to become the norm. But, the good news is that compared to where we were back when ESOC was still very popular, I would say the YouTube scene now is far healthier and far more, there's a lot more options on the menu for a viewer now than there was in like 2016.
Right.
Back then it was ESOC or nothing. Maybe you had guys like Azank who uploaded just their pure game footage.
Right.
But the only place you could go for high level commentary was ESOC. But now, the amount of guys that are involved and the amount of high quality YouTubers there are, and that's something that is giving me a lot of encouragement is, it's not just a bunch of guys that click record on OBS and then just, talk into their headset and upload. It's guys like you, like Lionheart, like Soldier, like Samurai Revolution, that put a lot of effort into this content and try to, make it as polished as possible. And so that's really encouraging to see. So I would say, YouTube-wise, we're the best we've ever been.
I want to talk about the developers in a second, but I want to ask as well about the YouTube scene, and I feel like that's more along the same train of thought, and then we'll double back to the developers. So what is that like for you, just as a YouTube AoE 3 content creator? Because I have my own, thoughts and things like that. I don't know. Have you gotten into running your own Discord, the Mr. V Discord, the V Cord? I guess that's what you call it. No, you haven't done that yet.
That's a great name. That's I have to. If I do, I'm gonna have to make you a moderator. Give you credit for that.
I would rather play in traffic than be a Discord moderator. I will be firmly honest with you, but I appreciate it.
You're not tired of having a life? Well, okay.
Yeah, no, I'm not.
All right. Well, speaking of having a life, I guess that's kind of the main reason I don't invest more into it. I upload a couple of games a week, and I really enjoy doing it. But to do what somebody like Lionheart does, which I have massive respect for him, if there are people listening to this that think I'm just a Lionheart fanboy, not completely, but I do have a ton of, admiration for the guy who, basically is the biggest face of the community, love him, hate him, or otherwise. But to do what he does, uploading 1 to 2 games every day, I just couldn't keep up with that. And at my current following, I could open a Discord, and I'm sure, you'd have a few people join up, but I would rather just be on the Discords and be interacting with people in, servers that are actually active and vibrant, because I've been to Discords before where it's basically just a ghost town, and I'm just not about that.
Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. And it's funny, the official AoE 3 Discord is very much like that ghost town feeling. There are people in there and they talk, but it's usually the same like 10 names that I see coming across the screen, and there's nothing really there to really engage in. But there's lots of other vibrant communities that exist. I know that you're in the Sunbros Discord, and you obviously have Free Food Party, the Lion's Den, all these places, and do you feel as if, like, as you say, like there's no like an unhealthy competition that you see that kind of crops up between the YouTube channels? I feel as if the community as a whole just kind of subscribes to everybody and kind of jumps around between all the different channels, and say like, oh yeah, we pretty much have a plethora of Age of Empires 3 content out there. Even with the drop off, like I know everybody was really worried about Drongo dropping off, and then I thought we saw Widgie kind of ascend into that scene and really take his place in that, but then I don't think he really makes as much anymore if he does. But it's been pretty healthy.
Yeah, it's very healthy. I know Widgie's starting to go back to AoE 3. He just strikes me as a guy that doesn't want to be pigeonholed, and I can absolutely empathize with that. I'm somebody who I'm very content with the game that I upload, and I don't really need to have more than that, but I think he just wants to be known for more than just Age of Empires 3, and good luck. But everybody has their favorite. I think it's very similar to what you said, where there's a range of casters, and that's kind of your main plethora. But everybody, has that one that they go to more often than the others. Like I have a healthy admiration for Lionheart, but he's actually not my favorite. Soldier is my favorite. Just because he keeps things casual. He's a very laid back guy. Seems like really nice dude.
Yeah.
And I just like his casting style.
Right. Do I have a favorite? And I'm thinking, who do I like? Probably nobody. No, wait. Well, I've said that you're my favorite. I would say that I like that one guy, Lieutenant, where he doesn't say anything. Like, he doesn't cast, he just puts the game up there, and I'm like, perfect. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, he rolls out games like it's his full-time job.
Right.
And I mean, they're always really good quality. And some guys, that's what they want. They don't want some dude just hamming it up in the background. And hey, whatever style works for you, there's an audience in this community for everybody. So, I don't think we need to compete over numbers, because at the end of the day, I think if we start doing that, we're taking ourselves way too seriously. We're a pretty niche community as it is. We don't need to be trying to divide it even more. It's not like we have the largest players numbers to begin with.
That's true. I think what is interesting, though, from that perspective is the fact that the numbers have grown and they continue to grow. Like, despite the neglect, I think the stability has caused it, and I think the constant pumping of content, from the people like us, that I think that there's been an increase, at least when you look at the Steam numbers and the Twitch numbers. You're like, we've overtaken Age of Mythology, and this is going to loop into the developer thing, right? But
sure,
it has been interesting to say, like, okay, like, there used to be a not too long ago time where it was an average 4K player count, and now we're past the 6K going into 7K on some weeks, right? Like, of an average daily count.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's some healthy growth. I mean, like, I don't know what we're doing. Maybe it is that YouTube scene. I don't know. Maybe when people, they're playing Age of Empires or whatever, and they see that, we're like that kind of, like, I don't know, we're like, we just refuse to die. You know what I mean? Like, this is just, we're going to keep plugging away.
We're definitely a very lovable cockroach, right? Like, we've been impossible to squish since 2005. And I mean, the devs, not intentionally, but they've certainly made an effort. I think that's part of it. I think the YouTube scene is really good. The ESOC tournaments still bring in, I think, the more competitive players, right? Like, guys who are just hooked on the competitive meta. I think they still rely on ESOC for a lot of their content. But what's really opened up in the past couple of years, which I think a lot of people were craving, is they were looking for an avenue to watch Age of Empires 3 that wasn't always competitive, right? And I remember when I was getting started, I was talking to guys about, like, how do you decide which games to cast? Do you just, browse the lobbies until you find a good one? Do you even watch any beforehand? Do you just go in there cold? And I remember so many people telling me, well, high elo, find the highest elo and just click on that. And I've come to believe that that's actually not what people are looking for. And I think there was a group of guys that were like, man, I'm so sick of watching 2K elo guys play over and over and over again. When am I going to see guys that are like me? Because everybody, when you're trying to learn the game, says, well, watch Julian, watch Kevin, watch Ezad. But when you're at 900 elo, I mean, those guys are so far above you that there's not actually a lot of practical game knowledge you can take.
Right.
And so, now that there's content where it features guys that are, 1400 elo or 1300 elo or heck, 1100 elo, guys in that lower bracket go, oh, okay, this guy's only slightly better than me. There's some really practical tips I could learn from this game.
Yeah, I firmly agree. I wonder, and I do cast, but basically a lot of my time now has been spent on making guides, doing the civilization spotlights, and doing an AoE 3 podcast, which is a kind of a weird thing to say, honestly, when you put it out loud. And so I guess my next question would be that, do you feel as if the content, like that kind of, you kind of mentioned it, right? This, like, you know, okay, well, we got sick of the kind of 2K rote sort of rinse and repeat, and so now it's kind of blown up and expanded. I wonder if maybe we're getting tired of even game casting. I mean, I feel like that's going to be the staple, the bread and butter, but, you know, like nobody thought of doing an AoE 3 podcast. I think Drongo did it. He did like 1 or 2 episodes, maybe, and nobody watched it. But, you know, nobody ever thought about doing something different until you do it, right? So it's like, I wonder if maybe we're kind of getting tired of the same sort of casting formula. Maybe we're going to start seeing a kind of a rethinking of how our content creation is going to go in the future.
I think we definitely need to evolve. And the fact that you're kind of branching out into those different areas of, you know, video types, I think is really good. And hats off to you for doing that. But yeah, I think there's going to be sort of an exhaustion here. Maybe, you know, I don't know if it'll happen before the DLC comes out or after the DLC comes out, because you know that guys are going to be pumping videos out like crazy after the DLC in the first week, 2 weeks, or a month. And yeah, I think people are going to start thinking to themselves, okay, how many 1v1s can I watch day after day before I move on to something else? And that's where, you know, I think the AoE 2 community really does have us soundly beat. Whereas, you know, they do have guys like T90 who are never going to stop casting games, and it's just a really sturdy foundation. But then you also got guys like the Spirit of the Law who break down the game on almost like a code level. And even someone like me who does not play AoE 2, has no desire to play AoE 2, you know, I consistently watch those videos just because they're interesting on a non-gamer level. They're just, they're fun to watch. And I definitely think we need something like that. And I think the direction you guys have been going is, you know, is a good first step.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think there are some guys that I know of that, I don't know if you've heard of Gideon AI. Yeah, he kind of is starting to kind of move in that direction of he just isn't consistent enough, I don't think, where, you know, we don't have a Spirit of the Law kind of guy. And then Steven Sundin is another guy that I know that I think he does a YouTube channel or something. I have to ask him. I need to see now out of myself because he typically guest casts and I'm good friends with him and I don't watch his stuff. He does like history breakdowns of like, I'm going to explain the history.
I've seen a couple of those.
Oh, okay. So that does exist. Okay. So we do have things like that, but you're like, you just made me think of this idea of, you know, maybe AoE 3 as a whole, like in terms of our content creation, it is going to have to, it's going to have to expand and be different. We're going to have new kinds of avenues of approach of bringing people into the game. I mean, why not even just like, I don't know, like, well, actually, one of the big things is that we don't have anybody in the treaty scene, like, at all. Like, is anybody, like casting and creating content for treaty players? Like,
I mean, Samurai Revolution is probably the one guy that I've seen upload
don't bring up that
2-hour treaty games.
All he does is FFA videos, and I've told him a million times, enough with the FFA. He does not.
Yeah, I mean, but they're so long. But, you know, I think the first step to branching out into those areas is, and maybe I'm going to kick the beehive here. Hopefully that's okay. I think overall, the community we need to stop taking ourselves so seriously all the time. Yeah. And I think that's one of the big problems is you have so many guys that have put so much skin into this game. I'm talking 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 games. And they've almost kind of made it a firm part of their identity.
Yeah.
And so they take the game so seriously all the time. And so, you know, the minute somebody comes out with a new build, rather than going, oh, that's fun, like, let's make a comedic video about it, everybody just goes, no, it's not meta. Get rid of it. Get it out of here. It sucks, right? And it's those guys that I think make the entry into the AoE 3 community a bit prickly for a lot of newbies, because they come in and they're like, man, these guys they are not the most welcoming bunch.
Right.
And that's certainly not everybody, but I think, you know, we can all think of some players or some groups of players where if that's your first introduction to Age of Empires 3, you probably won't want to stay super long.
There's a video from Lionheart. I don't know if you've seen it, but it had to do with Italy revolting into Brazil, and
oh my God.
they would get the papal arsenal and then some other tech, some other shipment from the Brazil home city that would then cause all home cities to be like only 30 seconds long or something like that to ship in, or something crazy, like super fast. And then they spammed like papal units, papal guard units, and like the papal lancers, and then they just like won, you know. And it's interesting because you see this and it's like, well, that's really funky and silly and whatever, like Italy, you know, revolt into, you know, very fast papal units. Like, that's kind of weird. And you watch this video and you're like, this is totally punishable, you know, because he doesn't, you know, he only later on he ends up getting defensive buildings, and you know, you're like, wow, he doesn't, because he's playing against a Mexico player who's doing like a typical FI, so they don't get a lot of pressure in. And so you're like, well, this is pretty counterable. But then it's interesting to what you were saying about how like there's just people who are just really, really serious, and they're so caught up in this identity thing, because immediately there's forum posts, immediately there's a Reddit post like of like, this is broken the meta. They said that Italy was dead. It's not. Like, now we're gonna have to deal with this cancer build, and oh my gosh, you know. And it's this really, really rigid, you know, like exactly as you said, of like this sort of like overt reaction to something, and it's like, you know, why are you spending so much time on this and immediately assuming the worst? Like, instead, like, you know, people were always crying, you know, they keep saying, well, you know, oh my God, like they need to patch this and they need to do that, and like this is ridiculous and da 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 da. And I'm like, you know, I don't know, we haven't really explored the tools really to, like, you're saying you watched a video, you saw something, and then you're immediately reacting, and then it's like, well, why don't you learn a little bit about how to, I don't know, sorry, a skill issue, like maybe counter it, like, I don't know. You see what I mean? Like,
yeah, absolutely. There's a ton of guys in the community that could use a healthy dose of self-deprecation, because, you know, they give up, and maybe, you know, in real life these guys are perfectly fine people. I think that's what it is. You know, I don't think any of these people are, you know, they walk out their door and they're just evil human beings, but they get into this kind of echo chamber of, I need to be the best, or I need to be one of the best. And, you know, part of that is the over importance of elo, which I keep telling people is a deceptive stat, and you should just not care about it, honestly. If you do care about it, that's fine, but you know, people put so much identity in their stock and their rank, and I think that's why they're so unwilling to just try out how fun this game can be, because they're so focused on, well, if I'm doing these weird builds that don't really work, then I'm not honing my Brit GMT build, and I'm not going to make the top 100. You know, and that's not the attitude you should take when you're playing any game, let alone Age of Empires 3, which is a 20-year-old game that, you know, it's not worth losing sleep over at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think maybe a big part of this too is the lack of outlet that you find within the game, right? So like, let's say you do love Age of Empires 3 and you play it a lot. Okay, I can play. You're not doing you're not doing lobby games. Like, you're not doing casual lobby games, because that's just atrocious. You're either like totally mismatched, like it's 99% of the time it's mismatched skill. It's all over the place. It doesn't work.
Have you, sorry to interrupt, but have you ever like gone on to the Free Food Party website and you've gone to like the active game lobbies? Have you seen just the sheer difference in rank when you look at team games? Because that proves your point perfectly. Like, you look at team games, and I'm looking at it right now, okay? I'm looking at a 2v2 that's going on as we're recording this. It's a 1600 elo guy and an 1100 elo guy versus two 500 elos. And that's why we don't play casual, because there's no, you know, there's no filter, there's no way of moderating any of it. So unless you have, you know, and that's why Age of Sunbros is such a godsend. Unless you have a community like that where you're like, okay, I want to play some 2v2, who's up for it? You're just kind of screwed.
Right. You're going to get matched, and it's rough. And so you're going to have to go to rank queue. You're either going to fight AI and you're going to comp stomp. Okay.
Yep.
But if you're going to play multiplayer, you're going to have to queue ranked lobby. Treaty is still busted. It don't work. And then, so you're not playing Treaty. And then, so you're either playing 1v1 or 2v2, and then you better have a friend for the 2v2, and then for the 1v1, it's the same standard. And so there's really nothing in the game besides this idea of my 1v1 elo rank and my 2v2 elo rank. Just in terms of an outlet and an experience, right? Unless you're, you can play some casual games inside of a Discord, right? If you and I decided to play a game now,
sure,
that would be one thing, right? That's an outlet. Or I can queue up and we can play 2v2 or whatever. But for the most part, there's a distinguishing lack of content that is existing within the game for people to have an outlet for other things to achieve, if that makes sense, right? So there's no other, first off, elo is just that one number, and I've already talked about this with Lionheart about how even that needs to be discussed and changed, I think, in terms of a ranking system. But
I thought your guys' ideas for bringing back the old ranking system, I thought that was genius.
I mean, I don't know why it was changed to begin with, to be honest with you. You already had it. I don't know.
And it's okay to have both, right? It's, all you would have to do is say, okay, SerSharkDad is currently a second lieutenant, and then in parentheses, put the elo number.
Right.
It's not that big of a deal. And see, these are the things that, oh man, I'm already getting riled up. These are the things where I'm like, they tell you, well, we got a lot going on. We got Age of Mythology, but I'm not a game coder, so I don't know how hard it is. I can't imagine it would be that much of a terrible thing to do to add a couple of quality of life changes like that. Yeah. I doubt that would take a team more than a couple of weeks or a month, but it's just not a priority.
Yeah, I just think there's a lacking in outlet there, right? So my big thing too is that the profile page, the earning of medals or the earning of banners or new profile pictures or something like that can definitely be tied to, heck, even put it in your rank. We can have an unranked queue to earn awards, right? Or you can even do it in ranked queue. If you say I don't know, you were talking about Strelitz spam earlier. It's we'll have, earn 500 Strelitz casualties in a single ranked game. And it's that forces you to play Russia, and that forces you to if I want, you don't have to do it, right? But if you want an award or you just happen to win the award, that'd be kind of cool, right? I lost 500 Strelitz in a ranked game.
Absolutely.
And I feel that would open up the outlet of what can be achieved, right? Of forcing people to maybe play different civs, think of new ways of playing, and want to engage in the game in a different way rather than you're saying this super serious, I'm trying to grind out the elo. And I don't really blame anybody for kind of approaching the game like that, because that's what the game has on offer, right? We only have very few other, the historical maps is a great addition, and then of course you have the what are they called, historical scenarios? Is that what are they called, the historical battles? Is that what they're called?
Yeah, those are really good. I think they need more of those.
Yeah.
And I think they need to make them playable as a competitive game, right? So, imagine a mode where you have this list of battles with preset armies. There's really no building aspect to it, but it's the Battle of Waterloo. It's a 2v1. You got one guy playing the French. He's just got a massive army of, upgraded units. And then the other two are playing as the British and the Germans, right? Technically Prussians, but, we don't have Prussians, so whatever. Those kinds of games, I think that's what could really solve a lot of the problems of just making content that's purely fun and not based on, well, what's the build? What build is he doing, right? Because that's the aspect that people get so hung up on. There used to be this game mode in Legacy. I don't know if you ever played it, but I don't even remember what it was called. but it was like there was a map that was just an open plane. It was just a circle. And you would have like 6 to 7, maybe even 8 players. And they would all have a fort with stone walls and like a commandery in the back of it. And in the commandery, you could select which unit you were producing. And that commandery would just automatically produce units at a certain rate. And then the more units you went on in the map and killed of the other players, the faster your commandery would generate more units. And it was just this really fun free-for-all that didn't have anything to do with buildings or card orders. It was just micro fights and just, how many kills can I rack up? Can I kill the guy next to me? Should I work with the guy next to me? It was just a really fun kind of, I don't know, let's just throw crap at the wall sort of game mode. And we don't really have anything like that in the game currently. It's all based on competitive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's that. I've never heard of it. Like, I didn't play too much Legacy. I played a bit, but yeah, I'm totally unfamiliar. That does sound a lot of fun. And I mean, the Tycoon mode, that kind of fell flat. I really like Tycoon, to be honest with you, but unfortunately, I don't know what happened there where they released that, and I guess people didn't understand it, or it was just kind of weird, maybe. But I think Tycoon is pretty interesting, and I kind of wish, again, like, maybe that's something that we need to do as content creators, of like pushing something of like, nobody's done it yet, but like, why not like sit down, learn Tycoon, and say like, we're gonna do some Tycoon matches and we're gonna cast it and like present it. I don't know, but like the community as a whole also has to be receptive to that, right? Like, if you can't just put your time and effort into something, learning something, casting something, putting it together, editing it, and then putting it out there only for it to garner no interest simply because of the fact that it is this different thing. So we are kind of our own enemy in this as well. You know what I mean? It's like,
right,
we say like, well, it would be cool if there was something different, and then it's like, okay, let's go do the different thing, and they're like, nah, I'm gonna
right, I'm gonna go queue up on ranked.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But this is another thing that then this takes us back, right, where you were mentioning about the developers, and you made a comment about how we're going to need more content and more sort of effort put into the game, or else we're not going to be able to do what we do as content creators for the game. And I wanted to give you the opportunity at this point to kind of expand on that now.
Sure. So, I was actually kind of pleasantly surprised by your interview with Lionheart, and he was very kind towards the development team. And like, I thought that was really awesome because, in this sort of environment we're currently in post-patch, there's not a lot of people willing to stick up for the guys the guys like Tilanus. I am not so sanguine as he is. I felt really, really kind of ripped off by the patch. And yes, it was a nice balanced patch. It did not destroy the game. It didn't really even make the game worse in any significant ways. It just, made it worse if you liked a particular civ, which that's going to happen with every patch. What really bothered me is kind of what you guys talked about when you were talking about the patch, which was the quality of life. I wasn't really that concerned about the civ balance, but the fact that the quality of life was so minimal, and I'm not saying what they did was bad, translations, that's great. I think they renamed a couple of things, but there's just so much missing that other games in this series have, and it just goes back to the fact of, like, the one I always bring up, and I know it only affects guys like me and you and other casters, but when I watch AOM with their casting UI, and then I see my game, which has been out for nearly 5 years now,
right,
and it's on the same engine,
yep,
and we still don't have it. To me, that's like, I can't find a way to excuse the developers for that one. I can excuse delayed DLCs, I can excuse a lack of game modes because that takes a lot of work. How much work can it be to copy what you have in AOM onto a game that's the same engine and is, probably more stable than AOM because it's just been out for so much longer?
Do you feel as if this is, I don't know, some people say that Age of Empires 3 is really held back just because of the way that the game plays, that the wild swings and the home city shipments, and it's a more complicated game in terms of an RTS. I think that's probably a big part of it, but it sounds as if you're suggesting that we could be doing a lot more. This could be a lot bigger if those small changes were just made based on kind of where you're standing, where you're like, no, if they just put a few of those quality of life things in, we would have a healthier and more vibrant community that they're just simply like not tapping into at this point.
I don't think it would be an immediate solution. Adding a UI is not going to jack up our player numbers by, 2,000-3,000. But it would be a big gesture to the people that are currently here. Mm-hmm. And, when I suggest these updates or these changes, it's not so much of I want to increase the community, because I like where the community is right now. If it grows, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. But if it stays where it is, that's also okay. I just think we've gone a very long time without that sort of pat on the head or that reassurance that we know you're there. Yeah. And, I can feel just the morale of the community as a whole is shaky, right? And if, we continue to watch other games be held up while we are getting the scraps off the table, you're going to see more and more people leave, and not leave to go to other Age games, but just leave entirely. And, to your point about the game being too complicated, that's never something I've really agreed with, because if you watch AoE 2, AoE 2 is a complicated game. It's just complicated in a different way, right? Like AoE 2 has so many upgrades and +1s and -1s and +2s and bonus damage, and like that's not a simple game. It looks simple. And then the same with AoE 4. It's just their complication comes in the fact that there's like 700 different buildings to build. And, if you build this building in this spot, you get a plus, 0.3 to your food gather rate. Like all of the Age of Empires games are complicated. They're just all complicated in a different way. Yeah. And I think when people look at AoE 3, it's so different from the norm that they perceive it as, oh wow, this game is just this is a totally different beast, when it's really not.
Yeah, what kills me too is that, for example, like I think there are two potential players that could come into AoE 3. Now, obviously, this is very much overstating the case. I understand that, regular Joe Blow could potentially just go to Age of Empires 3 because it's free to play, and then play it and be like, I love it, and then buy it. I understand that exists. But in terms of the two, what I find is that if I'm sitting to, like, if World's Edge calls and says, hey, you come to the strategy meetings, man, we'll hire you. I'm not saying no, okay, but right. The way that I would approach that meeting is this. I would say there's two potential players that you bring into the game. One are existing Age of Empires players, right? They're in the series somewhere and they're curious about other titles in the Age of Empires series, and because either they want to play more of the same but different, or they're tired of the title that they're currently playing and they want to switch over. Or RTS players who are attracted to the Age of Empires series as a whole, and they're coming from outside of that series, right? Not moving within it, but they're coming from outside of it and they're looking at the games, right? These are your two players. What will happen inevitably to both of them at the same time, which I think is going to be the majority drip, right, of your player base. What will happen is that they will take a gander at all of them, and unless they are very, very compelled by 18th century early modern warfare, which a lot of us are, I'm not going to knock that, But you will just immediately realize that this is the game that does not have the seasonal updates that the other games have. They don't have the same sort of DLC release schedule. They don't have the same sort of community engagement as the other games do. Like right off the bat, you'll realize that it is a far more bare cupboard compared to the other cupboards or pantries that exist in terms of the age of titles. That's not a knock. That's not a knock at all on the gameplay. That's not a knock at all on the community, on the graphics, on the fidelity of the game, how it plays. None of that. It is simply just the sort of window shopping, right? Like, what does this look like? How does it go? Well, what we have is that when you go to the profile page, it shows you a couple of numbers. And then when you hit play, you have your wonderful options of 1v1, 2v2, and a treaty rank that doesn't work. Right. And then, you want to play casual? Like, well, as we've already stated, these are the... And then you have a casual rank. Well, what is the casual rank? How does it work? What does it do? Nothing. It does nothing, actually. And we still don't really know how it works. I'm not... And if I swear to God, if somebody in the comments is like, well, actually, shut up. Like, it's stupid. It's so stupid. And I get your point, right? This is me agreeing with you, right? Is that it's just odd to me that people are like, why are you keep harping on this point? It's because, again, these are the two kinds of players that you're trying to bring in. And these two players are just going to they're just going to completely neglect this store, right? Just by looking into the window, right? They're walking along the street of the Age of Empires street, right? They have a number of titles to choose from. What store are they going to walk into, right? And when they look into our window, it's not a lot there. And again, unless you are compelled by muskets and cavalry, and colonial warfare, we don't have much on offer, to be honest with you.
Sure. Yeah. And that's where we have to really, dig deep and ask ourselves, what do we do better than the other titles? And I don't want to create a feeling of competition, because obviously you don't want to look at the AoE 2 guys and think that, they're somehow your enemy. They're not. A lot of those guys are, also some of the ones that play AoE 3, maybe not competitively, because the competitive players are almost they're very loyal. That's what I'll say. I'll use the nice version of it. They're very loyal to their chosen game. But yeah, when you talk about a casual, what does AoE 3 do better than the other titles? And I would say our big hook is variety. And for some reason, the community has taken that variety in terms of units and mechanics and playstyles, and we've made that a negative. And I don't know why we did that, right? Like, our game is awesome because of all the stuff you can do in it, right? You want to, revolt, you want to boom, you want to turtle, you want to make native units, you want to make mercenary units, you want to, invest in a weird card that, turns into, I don't know, like I'm thinking of the build that you just explained with Italy, right? There's all of those different avenues for you. Whereas if you go to a game like AoE 2, there's a lot of civs, but all of those civs more or less have the same units besides one or two. And so I just think we need to stop looking at the variety as a bad thing, a thing that keeps players from investing in. We need to start treating that as our strength. Now, what our weaknesses are is we are the least user-friendly game out of all of the titles. Our UI is hard to navigate. Like, I still don't quite know the most efficient way to friend somebody online. Yeah. It's like, it's still, how do you chat with people? How do you find people? How do you invite people? How do you host a game? When you go into the casual, browser, there's like 9 buttons on the bottom, and what do all these do, right? And there's no like toggle that says, oh, the spectate button does this, or at least I don't think there is. Right. And you're just kind of expected to figure it out. And a lot of new players say, well, no, I don't want to figure it out. And I guess that's maybe another place where we've kind of neglected to make content, right? We always cast games as if everybody knows what we're talking about, when maybe somebody needs to bite the bullet and say, okay, I'm going to make a video that explains what every single button in the main menu does for somebody that does not know what to do.
Can you imagine?
Like, I hate that we need that video, but you know, I think somebody needs to make it.
But I think that's
it's not going to be me. But
that's a really good point. That it's like, you know, hey, what we consider to be the unapproachable side of Age of Empires 3, this idea of, you know, the variety, and how complicated that may be. We shouldn't deride that. We should embrace that more. And I like that. And I like this. And I think the developers are on that path because they continue to add new civs, much to my annoyance. But they're like, we're going to add new civs and we're going to continue to lean into that complexity of gameplay and potential options that are open to the player. And I think they understand that, and I think the gameplay is there and it's solid. But like you said, that the user friendliness, right? The user side of the experience, and also the content creator side of the experience too. Not for anything. I think that those two things are just kind of sort of abysmally lacking. And my question then is that and let me give you a hypothetical actually. If they release the 2 civs and then like one more patch, like, and I'm not going to even say like let's say none of the UI stuff we're talking about, none of the quality of life stuff that we keep clamoring for. They release the 2 civs, you get, you know, your home city, your upgrades, you know, they have their decks, and then we get one big patch to kind of ease them into the fold of the meta, right? To just kind of smooth the, you know, the excesses out as it's inevitably going to happen. And then they say after that, we're done. Like that's it. You guys are not, there's nothing more from us that you're going to get for this title. We're shutting the doors. 5 years is good. We're done. I don't think that's going to happen, but let's just say that they do. Do you think that would be better or worse for us as a community and as content creators? I know that's a big question, but it's a good question. I think it would be good, with a caveat. If the developers said, we are going to leave this title to the community, but we are going to make it so that, just like you could with the old game, you can basically take this game's code and create whatever fan-made thing you want with it. Because if the code could support a fan-made UI, you know one would already have been made. The reason why we don't have these things is because, for whatever reason, DE does not allow these things to be made, or it's so complicated that people can't, they don't even want to try. So if the developers were to take a step back and say, okay, we're leaving, but we're leaving the game flexible enough that you guys can basically take it in whatever direction you want, then I think, you know, you would basically see a repeat of what you saw with ESOC like 8 years ago, right? ESOC, they realized that Legacy was not going to get any more support after, you know, TAD, the Asian dynasties. And so they said, okay, screw it. Like, this game's code isn't super hard to work with. We can implement a lot of new things. We're going to take it. And I think it would also end a lot of the uncertainty. You know, people wouldn't be arguing about, ooh, what's this, what's that, who's going to get nerfed, who's going to get buffed. It would just be, these are the way the civs are. Again, a lot like ESOC, everybody knew what the strong civs were, and honestly, nobody really cared. Like, we all knew Eero was broken. We all knew Ottoman was stupid, but that was the way things were. You know, we weren't always dreading a patch that was just going to flip everything on its head. Yeah. It makes me wonder because, you know, it kind of ties us back into the original ESOC conversation of, if the developers were to just say, we're done, but like you said, with that kind of caveat that it's now open season, as it were, you know, that would allow the community to kind of step in and be the change that it wants to see in the world, right? Of like, we're going to actually, and because in fact, like, not for anything, some of the modding that has been done in this game has bled over into developer choices, right? I think one of the small ones that I think was quite smart was that, I forget, there was, like, for those who don't know, is that your age up options used to block the freaking screen. when you would click age up, right? Do you remember that? And it would be like,
Oh,
you couldn't see it. And then somebody made a mod that's like, I made the age up choices see-through. So you can actually see what the heck is going on. And then I think there was a different mod that even like flashed the, your resources when you were ready to age up. Like that wasn't also an original thing. And then the developers were like, oh, that's actually really smart. Let's just add that into the game. But then that leads to more questions of like, well, why not allow the modding scene? I don't know. See, because then you get into kind of Bethesda debates where like Bethesda's like, well, we make an incomplete game, but we let our modders like do the work for us, and I hate that. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, I would want to know this, and this comes down to the communication bit, which is what I talked about in the last podcast, right? It's like, I would just want to know, like, hey, if we're going to cut this down, just say it. You know what I mean? And then in that way, you open it up, and then we can be the changes that we want to see. But if you're going to do something, then talk to us, ask us what it is, and tell us that you're listening. And it can't be just Talanis, like, in Twitch streams and talking to people and hearing people out. I feel like we put somebody in our corner to kind of just like at least field the questions, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
And you have willing guys. There are a number of YouTubers that if you reached out to a Lionheart, a Soldier, a Widgie, whoever, they'd be willing to do these things. And I think we've said it over and over and over again across, however many episodes of this podcast. The communication is the thing that's lacking.
Oh yeah.
And I would love to just sit down with the devs and go, what is it about our community that makes you not want to communicate? Because if there's something we need to fix, then make that known. Because AoE 3 has this sort of black sheep reputation of toxicity and drama, which I don't fully subscribe to, but I'm also not going to deny that, we have skeletons in our closet.
Sure.
But then tell us that. The problem is they don't make known what the reason for the neglect is, and so we just kind of sit here pondering.
Right.
Whereas if you said, yeah, guys, your community is too toxic, this weird sort of rivalry you have between one of the top players and the main tournament organizers, we want nothing to do with it. Then we could make active steps to fix that. But right now we just don't know. It's like the kid that's sitting there going, what did I do wrong? Why are you mad at me?
But you were saying that you think that we do need, you said something interesting earlier, and I wanted to go back to that, well, we shouldn't really try to even put too much more and try to branch out and really do the work. I mean, assuming that they're not stepping down and stepping aside, right, and saying that this game has now reached the end of its life cycle. It's up to you guys now from this point on. Like, if we're still going to exist in this sort of gray in-between space, then content creators need to be a little bit more careful. I don't know how you put it. You're saying that, like, well, because this is going to... that without the developer support, we were going to run aground, basically, that we were going to have trouble as content creators, that we wouldn't be able to. And I wanted you to kind of expand on that. I don't know if you remember what you said.
Yeah. So basically, kind of going back, I was talking about, as we expand the types of content that people put out besides just casting 1v1s, you don't want to go into the realm of you're putting so much effort into it that the developers just kind of decide to sit back, let the game just sort of rot because they've got an active enough community to keep it alive. Like a good example would be, have you ever played the Total War series from Creative Assembly?
I played Empire, which is the best one. I don't care what anybody says.
Yes. Oh, I freaking love. Maybe it's the time period for me. I love Empire, even though the AI is.
Oh yeah.
Very
abysmal, but yeah.
Yeah. But see, that community is going through way more turmoil than we ever have. And I think one of the reasons for it is they had such a healthy modding community for their historical titles. You had guys doing total conversion mods. You had guys just completely flipping the game's code on its head. That Creative Assembly just kind of decided, okay, well, we don't need to try anymore. And now you've got all these guys that are like, where's the next title? Where's the next title? And they're still playing, modded versions of of 15-year-old games.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just don't want us all to be making content 3 years from now and the developers still haven't said anything, and they're just kind of coasting on the idea of, well, they're going to keep putting out content and we'll just keep making money off of it. Not that they make a lot of money off of what we do, but I think the communication is what needs to come first.
Yeah.
Either pass the torch and say, yep, this is going to be community led from here on out, or be more proactive. But they want this weird middle ground where the community is doing most of the work, but it's still there in overall authority. And to me, that's just a middle ground that's not sustainable.
Yeah, I definitely see your point. I think it's a more controversial take, and I'd be curious to see what people say, in the comments and in the feedback that I'm going to get from this video of like, oh, I don't agree with that at all. Like, it's not that, but I hear your point, and I think that's an interesting thing to consider. And I really wonder what the numbers were on the free-to-play Switch then, because, because people are playing this game, and like I said, it is free to play with the rotation, and then how much did that attract people in? And that makes me wonder, and because the point of you saying making money off the content creation, that we're kind of like being the ambassadors of the brand for free, right, for a game that is for a game and a developer team that is just content, like you're saying, to just sit back and let us push the brand for nothing, right, for pennies on the dollar, as we would say it. And
yeah,
that is, I think that's an interesting dynamic, especially because, again, since it is free to play, like, we are pushing a game that is technically free, but then exactly how many of those people are then being brought in to pay? I don't even know how much this game is on Steam. How much does this cost on Steam?
I don't actually. Yeah, I mean, I don't actually know how many players that feature brought in. I'm sure, it brought in some curious eyes that just love the time period. And, this is a time period that doesn't have a lot of variety in terms of gaming. Like, I can't count that many games set in this time period. But I can fill a novel with medieval period games. And so I'm sure some people that were like, oh, a new Musket era game, let me check it out. So maybe a little bit of that pull, but do I think the free to play brought in an extra 1,000, 2,000, or even 500 players? Probably
Not consistently, probably not. So base game is $20. If we do the bundle,
really?
Yeah, if you do the bundle though, which you might as well, because it's going to be the base game, United States, Mexico, African Royals, Knights of the Mediterranean. And so apparently I'm missing one bit of this, which is, my price is $7.49. I'm curious as to what exactly am I missing. Oh, I'm missing the definitive edition soundtrack. So you get a discount of 25% on all of it. So 20 plus, 5, 25, then 26, so 31, 40, and then 50, and then 60, and then 25% off of the $60 for the whole bundle. Basically, is how they do that. And so what would that? So that'd be $15 off, right? Because that's $15 off. So like that. $45 for everything said and done, which is actually not a bad deal.
No,
considering what you get.
And for the content, I mean, even if you buy it and just play single player and you go through all of the campaigns, that's still well worth your money, even if you never touch a ranked lobby in your life.
Right. This is interesting, and I really wonder what the future of our content creation is going to look like then, because, like you said, we are in this sort of odd in between in which we cover a lot of ground, right? Because there is no like concentric ESOC anymore, because there just hasn't been a need for it, because we did have developer support, at least semi-consistently. Their communication still sucked, but the support was there. Things were changing and moving. We were having DLC releases, and so there was nothing like of a sort of community-led project to keep the game going and alive and be the one-stop shop. Things have kind of blown up and fragmented into lots of different pieces. You know, you have your channel, I have my channel, or this is not my channel, this is a team's channel. But, you know, you have all these other content creators out here, Discords and things like that. And then only for this to now be in this sort of odd holding pattern. You know, we were not put in the Red Bull tournament. We got a very abysmal first look at the DLC. You know, when they did that Twitch stream, I don't know if you remember that Age of Empires celebration.
Oh, the PNG to end all discussion.
Yes, yeah, pretty much. That was fantastic. And you know, and then nothing since then except the data patch, right? So it is weird. It is weird because, and we've gone through a lot of new faces, essentially. Like, you know, as a community, we kind of forget that we're a far cry from where we first started, right? We are long away from the heyday of Aussie Drongo, you know, and that kind of more consistent output of patches and DLCs. You know, I think, you know, we're a few years removed from that now. And it honestly seems like when you look back on it, I'm like, maybe we didn't appreciate it enough when we had it.
Sure. Well, let me ask you this. I really like that you keep the responsibility on the community. I think that's smart. You know, I think even as I'm looking back at this conversation, I can fall in the trap of putting too much of too much of it on the devs and saying, well, it's the devs have to do it. It's up to the devs. But I guess what I'm wondering is, and maybe this is a bit of a controversial question, is our culture, the culture of the community, like take your standard Age of Empires 3 streamers Twitch chat, okay, as an example of culture and community. Do you think something in that realm needs to change before we get the attention that we crave so much?
No, not at all.
No?
Not at all. I think cynically speaking, are those people willing and paying customers? The answer is yes. Hands down. Yeah. They are. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times, well, a lot being 50-50, like if I'm interacting with people in this community, I either like have a really wonderful time and I meet some fantastic people, right? Or I meet the kind of people that like I want to put my head through a window. It's really, and there's hardly really an in between, you know, and I think that happens no matter what. But what I look at from their perspective is that these people are the kinds of people that are going to buy a DLC when I release it. You know what I mean? Like this is it. And so really, how do you make sure that those people stay around to buy the DLC? You just have to keep them there, right? You have to keep them sitting and waiting and wanting. And I think the key to that is keeping them in those Twitch streams. I don't really know if it has much to do with like us as a community and our culture, because I think I've seen just far worse. I mean, League of Legends gets more support than anybody else, and I mean that is if you want to honestly,
MOBAs in general.
Yeah, in general.
Like I was never a Dota guy. I was never a League of Legends guy, but I was really into Smite for like a year or two, which is like the kind of diet version of a MOBA.
Isn't that a card game? Isn't Smite a card game?
No, it's like a MOBA but set in like the gods of a bunch of different pantheons.
Oh. Okay.
And yeah, I agree 100%, right? Like there are communities out there, or, you know, take Call of Duty, or, you know, take any, I guess, FPS, and you're going to find a lot more, you know, toxicity there.
Sure.
So yeah, I think that's a good point. You know, if the guys want to buy the DLC, who cares if, you know, they're kind of having at each other in a Twitch chat, right? Maybe trying to tamp down on that is actually what's going to cause more of them to go away, right? It's not like a school classroom, right? It's not something that you have to overly moderate, which is something I have been seeing out of ESOC that maybe is a criticism I could levy towards them, is the amount of moderation they tend to do is quite heavy-handed. And I think that's just left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths.
That's interesting.
Like they walk in and, you know, they just feel like they can't be edgy in any way. They can't say anything remotely controversial, which I'm a very just say what you want to say as long as it's not actively physically harming someone. I don't really care how, how raunchy or extreme people's language is, because at the end of the day, words are just words. And so, yeah, you've kind of changed my mind on that, because I walked into this thinking.
I think about do you play Helldivers 2 at all?
I did for like a little bit, but it wasn't my cup of tea.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I'm a huge Helldivers 2 player, huge fan. I play it a lot, and it's interesting. And I always go back to this in my mind when anybody brings up this subject, and I use this as an example. They have a community manager. They have a couple community managers. Some were not so loved and they were fired. But the big one and the main one is, his name is Twinbeard. Okay, this guy called Twinbeard on Discord. And he engages on Reddit, he engages on Twitch, on Discord. And this guy, he doesn't do any of the developing stuff. He doesn't do any of the coding. He's not, but what he does is he's the in-between, right? He's the community manager. He does some moderation, he does some engagement, this, that, and the other. And really all people want, an example of that community, is that, which is a much larger community, is just people just want to be heard and like seen, understood, and known that what their experience is in the game and how they're spending they're like, hey, I chose to spend my money and my leisure time on you, and I want to know that this is being heard and exchanged, right? That I'm a person and you're a person, and that we can talk. And he's so good at that, right? Because he'll get a question and then he'll have this like paragraph response and saying, and this kind of balance of like, I took your concerns, like I've actually received that concern like a number of times, so I want you to know that this is something that is definitely on the forefront. This is what the developers are working on. I pass this up the chain, but keep in mind that this, that, and the other is what's happening right now, and so I'm excited for this, and so maybe we can anticipate that, and be patient, whatever. And then the developers like own that, and then they move in that direction, and it makes it happen, right? And so actions then match up to those words. So I use that as an example of like, I think I think you would see a total difference, Mr. V, if you were in a Twitch stream. Like, let's say you start Twitch streaming and you have your, however, like, let's say you get like 100 people in your Twitch stream, and then suddenly somebody drops in and they have that fancy little golden name or whatever tag that says, I'm an employee of FE and or World's Edge or whatever, and I'm the community manager for Age of Empires 3. Everybody would be like, oh my gosh, like, hey, like, and then they would be joshing around with them and asking them questions and trying to get them to answer stuff or whatever, and they would engage with the community, and those people would feel seen and heard, and then they would reach out to you maybe and say like, hey, like, we wanted to see if you were interested in doing this for us or whatever, and then you would be like, absolutely, like, I'm happy to help out, and da-da-da-da, and like, they're like, yeah, so we can throw some money at that or whatever. And I think in all of that, I'm kind of rambling at this point, but in all of that is just to say you can create culture. You can create and change the culture that you want to see, as long as you have the people that are willing to be there and do it. And I think a lot of people are just kind of sitting around and they're like, I would like to be seen and heard and want to have these thoughts felt, by somebody out there. Like, you and I are not sitting here talking about it. Like, we enjoy each other's company. We enjoy our conversation. We like recording videos. Yeah, sure, we're content creators. But at the same time, it would feel nice and it would change things if I knew that this wasn't going out into the ether. Like, I shouldn't have to hear from somebody who then heard from somebody else that Talanis happened to listen to my podcast and said he thought it was really good. And I'm like, wow, that's really great. Awesome.
Right. Yeah.
That was a lot.
That was a lot, but it was all well said. And I think one of the things that you've kind of made me consider is, if the AoE III community is willing to go to such lengths without any feedback from World's Edge, I smile when I think about what we could accomplish if World's Edge just gave that minimum amount of feedback. And I think they'd be shocked by the amount of free volunteer work they could get out of some of these content creators if they only asked. And they didn't use corporate speak. They didn't put it in terms of like a forum post, but they just reached out and said, hey, we really want to show off this new build that we really tried to kind of encourage people to do in the patch, and we'd like you to upload a video about it. We can't pay you or anything, but would you be willing to do that? And then maybe we can give you some sort of credit or whatever. I can't think of a caster that wouldn't take them up on that. Like, I don't think Lionheart or Soldier or you or I would say, no, I'm boycotting you because of, I'm still pissy about the patch. But I think the thing that prohibits that is that the only communication we get is in that really dry, really kind of humanless corporate speak. It almost seems like all of our announcements are read by an AI, right?
Yeah.
It's never genuine. Like, think of like a Twitch chat where somebody's playing Sweden and the chat is all about like, oh, Sweden's broke, it's a terrible civ, it's the worst civ in the game. And then you have developers coming in and saying, yep, totally intentional, we don't like Sweden. Like, just that kind of stuff, it would be the jumpstart that the community needs.
Yeah. It'd be a total culture shift, that's for sure. I just keep thinking about Helldivers 2 and this idea of, people are so, they can get so upset in that community about a change. They add something into the game, they're always adding content, they're always doing things, and we would just love for just new content, right? But for them, they get it all the time, and they get upset because things get, misbalanced or whatever. And then he's just there in the gaps, and he's like, yeah, heard, understood, got it, it's being passed up. Like, think about this, consider this. And that totally changes the community's tune. And it's so fascinating. Like, somebody will say, like, well, Twinbeard said this. They'll post the screenshot from the Discord, and then it goes out to thousands of players, and they're like, yeah, cool, we'll wait. Like, you got it, man. Like, no big deal. Like, and then immediately you start to see that the kind of content that is being posted just shifts after that. It's remarkable of what you can accomplish if you just have somebody that was engaging, and really in the trenches with people. But as it stands, being real, we don't have that. I mean, I know that there is a community manager that's out there, but they don't really come down to Age of Empires 3 territory. And I don't know what the thinking and the knowledge is there. But yeah, I agree with you that it's like AI reading announcements, and all we get is just these just random things that pop up on the website.
We have heard your feedback, and we are doing our best, and we apologize. We here at Age of Empires 3, we love the community, and we are always it's that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
And I think a healthy amount of the blame does have to be put on our shoulders, because we are so focused on the competitive aspect of the game that we don't come across as the most fun-loving community. And so, it might be a little intimidating for like a new community manager to come in, and he goes into a Twitch chat and the entire chat is just about how there's balance or unbalance, or which builds suck and which builds don't. And I know if I was in that position, I'd go, I don't even know where to start here. Like, are they just going to immediately crucify me if I say, hey, I'm a dev? Do I even bother to take that first step if this community is just going to immediately just chastise me,
Well, you obviously don't hire somebody who's totally green around the ears and knows what Age of Empires 3 is, right? And then, then you remind that person that you're getting paid to engage with this community, so learn. And two is that,
right,
hopefully they would vet that person. And then, and it's also just the internet, man. Like, it's gonna, as a community manager, you kind of have to take your licks, right? You kind of go with it. You have to stand in the gap and say like, yeah, I get it, and it's going to be different now. That's why I'm here. But yeah, you definitely are going to take licks, and it is intimidating. But like I said, I feel like it has a lot to do with the outlets of the game, right? And we as content creators, like, because this conversation was kind of in two parts, right? Because a lot of it is the game, right? Of do we have those outlets of saying, like within the game mechanics itself, of saying, okay, well, it doesn't always have to be ranked 1v1 or ranked 2v2.
Right.
It can be other things. But then are we also setting that tone and that culture in our own YouTube channels and our own Discords of like, there's no Tycoon tournaments. Like, you're not casting Tycoon games. Like, you know, I'm like, yeah, I mean, that is true. You know, there's, so it's a give and take, I think, you know, but I firmly agree with you that there is certainly definitely, I mean, at least from where we're standing, you and I are standing, that, man, they haven't done enough to really make the game, like you're saying, that there's, I like how you put it, you're like, I just smile at the thought, you know, of what we really could be, what we could be putting out there, you know what I mean? Like, if there was a lot more of that quality of life, a lot more of that, you know, just kind of the ease of use and casting and replaying and that these other titles get that we just don't have, you know? It's true.
It would just create a lot more uniformity across all of these different YouTubers, right? Because since we have that lack of quality of life, everybody kind of tries to make their own.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you go to any player and the overlay is different and the style is different and the font is different and the text is different. And, you know, whereas go to any Age of Empires 2 player and it's going to be the same layout across the board. And so it's really easy to swap back and forth between Free Food Party and Lionheart and Mr. V and Soldier because, well, they're all using the same UI because it's the game's UI. You know, we don't all have to go into Photoshop and make our own little timer cover to, you know, make the game, enjoyable.
Yeah.
But, you know, everybody's kind of got to do that now. And it's just an annoying part of the process. But, you know, it's something we do because we love the game and we love the community interaction. I don't think anybody uploads these thinking, man, this is going to make me so famous. I'm going to get so rich off of my AoE 3 videos.
Yeah, no shot.
You know, we do it because we love the game and we love the community interaction. And I think, you know, once you lose sight of that as a community or as a development team, then that's where you're kind of in the limbo that the game feels like it's in now.
Man. Well, I think we have hit our prescribed amount of time on that one.
Yeah.
We covered a lot of ground. We went from ESOC to content creation to developer stuff to the patch and just quality of life and you know, what is it to be you know, a YouTube content creator for Age of Empires 3. You know, I really appreciate your conversation, Mr. V. I hope that we do more of these. I hope we have you on for some guest casts. I would love to cast with you in the near future. I'd love to do more of this with you. You're a great guy, man. I really appreciate you being on.
Well, thank you. I'm gonna make you an offer right here and right now, if I may.
Okay.
And that is, you struck a chord with me by saying, like, nobody's casting Tycoon games, right? That's the example that stuck in my mind. And so if you'd be willing, I would like you to come to my channel, and I would, in lieu of a 1v1 ranked game, I would like to upload a video where you teach me how to play Tycoon, because I have never played Tycoon once.
Okay. I think I've played it twice. I'm going to learn it. I'm going to go to the team. I'm going to learn Tycoon now. I have to learn Tycoon. And then we're going to do a video where we're going to explain how to do Tycoon. And then you'll do your version, and then we'll do like a dual upload thing. That'll be kind of fun. But
love it.
Okay, we're going to teach Tycoon because nobody's done a video teaching Tycoon. I don't think it exists. So that's funny. Okay.
And that's the kind of stuff I want to do a lot more of. Like, I just did a map spotlight with spades where I showed like some maps from the holiday pack mod. I think you guys are using it for your Santa tournament.
Smash.
Yeah, that kind of stuff, you're absolutely right. And that is where we can take complete accountability, because that's on us, right? Like, we need to be the ones to say, you know what, screw it. I'm not casting Revnak v. Julian for the 800th time. Like, I'm gonna go and actually do something that we haven't done before.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's gonna take me longer to edit. And yeah, I won't just be able to pump it out. And it might not even get as many views, but screw it. And that's the attitude I think I need to adopt more. So thank you for enlightening me.
Listen, it was just the conversation flowing. I'm not going to take any sort of credit, but I am looking forward to this Tycoon video. You're going to have to give me a couple weeks on that one, but we will make that absolutely happen. I'm going to
laugh. I'm going to laugh. You're going to see my full ineptitude, so prepare yourself.
So I really appreciate you coming onto the show. If this is a show, the podcast, or whatever you want to call it. Really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thank you.
And of course, we will have all the links to all of your, your Discord name if anybody wants to message you, as well as your YouTube channel. We'll put all your links there in the description. Guys, seriously, if you are listening to this and you are not watching Mr. V, please do so. Really good content. Just a great caster all around, and obviously, as you can see, somebody who cares about the community, is passionate about you guys, loves interacting with you guys. So go ahead and give him the like and the subscribe. And just for us, I hope that you guys appreciated this episode. I know it's a little bit different. Doing a follow-up, wanted to talk more about content creation on this side of things, and have more of that conversation and bring Mr. V into it, uplift our fellow mid-elo players. And so other than that, if you guys like what we're doing, you like the kind of content that we are putting out here at the Age of Sunbros YouTube channel, please feel free, hit a like on this video, subscribe. We'd really appreciate it, guys. And we will see you in the next one.